Today we're going to be looking at Colourpop in the color Peach. So I think the first thing you might notice is that my swatches are labeled 1 through 12. I do like to remind everyone that those numbers are not synonymous with hair levels. Since I do different video clips and pictures and such throughout the video, the numbers just help us keep track of each swatch. Also, these are human hair swatches, but they are not virgin hair swatches, so that means they've been chemically colored, treated, or bleached at some point in their existences. 1 is green. I kind of want to see how the peach turns out on top. 2 is gray. 3 is a natural red. 4 is a soft black. And then 4 to 11 is a range that goes to platinum blonde. And then 12 is like a toned version of number 11. So to start, I will be taking the color directly from the container and I will apply it to the top of each swatch. Then some people do like to dilute their dyes, so I will do a diluted version at the bottom of each swatch. Please keep in mind everyone's hair is different, which means everyone's hair will take color differently, plus different screens and monitors and whatnot can make colors look different, so please just use my video as a reference for how this could possibly maybe turn out for you. For the diluted section, we're going to do a 2-to-1 ratio. So that's going to be 1 part of our dye to 2 parts diluter. Now, sometimes I do get questions about what diluter is. So if you are someone who doesn't know, the easiest way I can explain it is that it is something that lightens the color of a semi-permanent dye specifically. So usually each brand will sell their own version of a diluter, which can be really helpful because you'll keep the same consistency and texture as your dye. But to keep things fair between all of my videos and all of my colors, I personally actually just use a plain white conditioner as my diluter. All right, I'm gonna let these sit for about 2 hours. I will then rinse them out, and when they're dry, I will meet you back here and we can do some comparisons. So just generally speaking, I've been kind of giving a little bit of a warning before I get into these videos, just to remind everyone that my swatches, again, are not virgin hair. So virgin hair tends to be less porous, which means it doesn't absorb color as easily. So even if your hair does take a color, it could always wash out faster as well compared to my swatches. And especially with a color like this that is a little bit lighter, it's not insanely pigmented, I would caution you and ask that you at least do a strand test before just drying it all over your head. Okay, so I did look at this under a black light. It does not glow under the black light, so this is not a UV reactive dye. Now this color is called Peach, but to me it's a lot more coral. There is a chance, on your hair it could definitely look a lot more peach, but there's just a lot of pink in it that kind of gives it that corally vibe. To me, peach usually isn't this pink, but again, do a strand test. It could turn out completely different on you. So a 1 was originally the green swatch, and on the direct dye portion, it did technically take. I don't really see a lot of green coming through, but if you look at the number 11 in comparison, it is very different. It's like almost a brown, but not quite that neutral. There's still a bit of warmth in it, so something about it almost has kind of a natural look to it, but it's not quite natural. But I am excited to say that it did cover. The bottom half, on the other hand, I would say did not really cover. There are some spots, especially near to the bottom, that look less green, but overall I still see a lot of the green coming through. I think what kind of happens is the green neutralizes out some of those like reddish pinky tones, so it gets a lot more orangey almost over the green. 2 was the gray. That one looks a lot more cool tone, so it looks a lot more pinky, I would say, versus the other swatches. And when I say that, I mean like maybe like a more like cooler tone pink. It's still kind of warm, but a lot more cool compared to the lighter swatches. But it did cover on both the top and the bottom. It just looks a lot more muted, which is pretty normal for the gray swatch. 3 was the natural red. The undertone of the red did kind of help to amp up the color. Sometimes the natural red will kind of look like the brownish swatches with the color on top, but this time I definitely see a lot more of like warmth and pinkiness coming through on the natural red swatch than I do on like 6 or 7. The diluted section is kind of similar, but it looks a lot closer to a natural red. I think I do see a little bit more pink than I did before, but it's a little bit hard to tell. 4 was the soft black. I do not see a difference in this lighting anyways. 5 on the direct dye portion, I do see a slight difference, but it is so minimal. It kind of just changed the undertone of the brown a little bit, like it warmed it up a tiny bit. But if your hair, especially if it's virgin hair, I really don't recommend a color like this. If it's not virgin and it's brown, you might have some better luck with it, but I think I would look for something that is a little bit more pigmented if you have brown hair. 6, I would say also kind of looks pretty brown overall, but I do see a lot more of the warmth coming through than I did before. Even just looking at the diluted section, you can see that there is a difference on the top, but then when you look at even just like 9, there is quite the difference. Like a very warm undertoned brown, if that makes sense. I would say 8 is where you really can start to see the saturation coming through, but as the swatches get lighter, the color obviously gets more and more vibrant. And with that being said, it does kind of seem like it is meant for blonde hair because of how saturated it does look over the blonde, but depending on the look that you're going for, I don't think your hair needs to be super bright if you're not looking to have like a super vibrant pinky corally color. Over 9 and 10, the diluted section almost kind of has like a rose gold look to it as well. Whereas on the 11, it still stays pretty pink. And then 12 was the tone swatch. Usually this one kind of looks between 11 and 2, and I would say that's the same here. It's a little bit warmer in undertone compared to the number 2, but it's still muted like the number 2. So as for comparisons, I don't have anything that is exactly the same, but I do have a lot of colors that are in the same family. So I picked 2 that I thought would be kind of interesting to look at. So the first one is going to be Arctic Fox in the color Electric Paradise. This is comparable to number 12, number 11, number 10, and number 9. So I'd actually say that the Electric Paradise is not actually as similar to this as some of my other comparisons, but I felt like it would still be a good reference point for a lot of people. I may redo Electric Paradise in the future because I used to do my swatches a little bit differently. So on the top is the direct dye, and then I diluted it 2 separate times. So if you'd like me to redo Electric Paradise, I could totally do that. Just let me know. Electric Paradise is a UV reactive dye, so that means it glows under a black light, and therefore it is super bright. Now the interesting thing about this color is that the lighting has a really big effect on how it looks. So in some lighting, it can look really, really pink. In some lighting, it can look really, really orange. And in some lighting, it'll be kind of in between. I would say right now on the warmer swatches, it looks a little bit more in between. It's usually in like the more shadow lighting, I would say, where it looks a little more pinky. But you can see now that the Colourpop Peach is not a super neon-y bright color. It does still have a bit of softness to it, which explains why it is not UV reactive. But I do think it is a little bit more pigmented. So if your hair is not a super light blonde, you might get a better result, depending on what you want, with the Colourpop. The other comparison I wanted to look at today is Lunar Tides in the color Neon Guava. This is comparable to number 12, 11, 10, and 9. So like I said, I don't have any perfect matches for this currently. The Neon Guava, I would say, is in a similar family. You could tell that mostly on 9 and 10. On 11, it does become a lot more bright, which explains the name. It is called Neon Guava. So this also actually is UV reactive as well. In this lighting though, it is much more warm in undertone. And while I personally don't think peach is this warm, I do think down here is kind of more of a peachy color. So hopefully you can see what I mean now when I say that the Colourpop to me looks a little more corally than it does peachy. These kind of lighter warm pinks are pretty common in my collection though, so I think I will take some more photos in the future and post them on my Patreon. So if you're curious about some other comparisons, look down in the description below for a link to my Patreon because I will post some there. Alright, so now I'd like to get into the before and after clips, which those and then everything else after this point in the video are all going to be done in natural lighting. Because I am using natural lighting, that means I have to film on different days, which means the lighting environment between the days can definitely change. So if anything looks off or kind of weird between the before and after clips, that is why. I hope my video helped. If you have a request, I do have a link below to a Google form you can fill out. Just remember, I only do brands that do not test on animals. Thank you so very much to my patrons, and thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video.